Good evening, everyone. Before we begin, may I request everyone to please put their mobile phones on silent mode or flight mode so that we have an uninterrupted evening. Thank you. On behalf of the India International Centre, I welcome you all to this evening's talk. A special welcome to Life Trustee Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath and many dignitaries in the audience. Today's talk is on the topic, Rising Peril of Nuclear Weapons in the 21st Century, A World in Denial. It solemnly marks the 80th anniversary of the atomic bombings of the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. It is my privilege to extend a welcome to the eminent personalities on the stage, Shri Gopalkrishna Gandhi, Ambassador Rakesh Sood, and Ambassador Shyam Saran, President IIC. Allow me to present brief introductions of our distinguished speakers. Shri Gopalkrishna Gandhi, Life Trustee IIC, is a former administrator and diplomat who served as the 22nd Governor of West Bengal from 2004 to 2009. As a former IAS officer, he served as Secretary to the President of India, as Director of the Nehru Centre in the High Commission of India, London, as High Commissioner for India in South Africa and Lesotho, High Commissioner for India in Sri Lanka, and Ambassador of India in Norway and Iceland. He has authored and edited many books, including several works on his paternal grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi. He is presently Distinguished Professor of History and Politics at Ashoka University. Sir, we are deeply honored by your presence here today. Ambassador Rakesh Sood is a former Indian diplomat. He was ambassador and permanent representative to the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva and has served as India's ambassador to Afghanistan, Nepal, and France. He has also served as Deputy Chief of Mission in the Embassy of India in Washington, D.C. He has set up and led the Disarmament and International Security Affairs Division in the Ministry of External Affairs. After retiring in 2013, he was Special Envoy of the Prime Minister for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation till 2014. He is currently Distinguished Fellow at the Council for Strategic and Defense Research. Sir, we are privileged that you will be moderating the session this evening. May I now call upon Ambassador Shyam Saran, President IIC, to deliver his opening remarks. Thank you.
Good evening to all of you. I would like to extend a very, very warm welcome to my fellow Life Trustee, Gopalkrishna Gandhi ji, and also another colleague of mine, Ambassador Rakesh Sood. It is really a privilege for the IIC to have two very distinguished people who will be speaking to us about what is perhaps a neglected area today, the area of nuclear, the threat of nuclear weapons. It seems to have receded somewhat into the background. Let me just make a few points. One, that we are now living in an age where the threat of nuclear weapons has been greatly enhanced by the kind of technological advancements which have been taking place in such frenetic pace. How cyber security has got enmeshed with the nuclear domain. This is something which is a matter of deep concern, and I think the advances in artificial intelligence will only add to that potential threat. The second point I would like to make is that much of the theories of deterrence or prevention of nuclear war and how nuclear weapon states should communicate with each other were all evolved during a period where really, in a sense, it was a binary situation where you had the East and the West in confrontation. Therefore, in terms of some kind of a nuclear arms control regime, it was perhaps easier to make that happen, even though there were many possible potential accidents over the years. But now we have a situation where there is no binary left. There are now 5 nuclear weapon states who are declared nuclear weapon states, and there are 4 who are not declared nuclear weapon states. And this complicates the whole aspect of deterrence, the manner in which nuclear weapon states will interact with each other. All this is a big question mark. The third and last point I would like to make is that with respect to the theory of deterrence, this is based on the possible use or threat of use of nuclear weapons by states. But we also have now a terrorist dimension to the nuclear threat. The possibility that nuclear weapons could fall in the hands of terrorists or jihadis, this has been a very, very real threat. And how do you deal with that kind of a threat? Because if a terrorist undertakes a nuclear weapon attack from the soil of the country that is being attacked itself, then who do you deter? So these are issues which are very, very, I think, complicated, very difficult to resolve. But it does make the whole aspect of, a nuclear, how to deal with a nuclear threat that much more urgent. We are today observing the 80th anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. So this is a very perhaps appropriate occasion to refocus our attention on what is today a somewhat neglected threat. And no better person to really talk about these issues than Shri Gopalkrishna Gandhi, and of course my colleague Rakesh Sood. So with those words, I hand over the chair to Ambassador Rakesh Sood to take the proceedings further. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you and good evening. Let me first thank India International Center and particularly Ambassador Shyam Saran for inviting me to chair this evening's session. I think we all have, there's an exhibition that has been, it is being put up outside on 80 years and remembering Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is very evocative. In some ways, if you think about it, we should all actually not be feeling so nervous, because if there is a certain sense, after all, it was only used in 1945, it hasn't been used since. So, I mean, there is a strong norm or a taboo that has come into effect. During the height of the Cold War, the number of weapons just between the US and the then Soviet Union was something like about 65,000. And the other 3 countries accounted for another 1,000 weapons. Compared to that, today the total number of weapons in all the arsenals put together is below 15,000. So, I mean, that's no mean achievement if you think about it. Third, in the 60s, people were estimating that by 2000, there may be 25 countries with nuclear weapons. Instead of that, in addition to the 5, there are only 4 more that have developed and have nuclear weapons, so just 9 countries. So by all these metrics, there should be a sense of comfort or reassurance. But instead of that, what we are finding is that there is greater concern and greater worry. for a number of reasons. Why? Because the technologies have changed, and as Ambassador Saran mentioned, with the coming in of AI and coming in of cyber and so on, you have greater threats. The advent of non-state actors, international terrorist groups, that adds to the complications. But most important is a breakdown of general geopolitical predictability, as it were, which is the biggest problem. So much so that countries that had a certain notion of deterrence are looking at it differently and are looking at more usable nuclear weapons. And in that process, the norm against use of nuclear weapons is wearing thin. And I think this is what has led to a growing concern among people that perhaps it is very difficult to visualize that if they haven't been used for the last 80 years, it is very difficult to visualize that they won't be used during the next 80 years and what the consequences would be, because the kind of weapons that countries have developed today and exist in their arsenals are far, far more destructive than what Hiroshima and Nagasaki were. So with this, let me invite our distinguished speaker, Shri Gopalkrishna Gandhi ji. Sir, the floor is yours.
Please don't be worried by the sight of these pages. It has very big type, very big print. The speech or talk is not going to be very long. Esteemed President of the India International Center, Shri Shyam Saran, Shri Rakesh Sood in the audience, esteemed Shri Vora, former President of the IIC, and Srimati Vora in the audience, Shri Mani Shankar Iyer, distinguished invitees to the IIC's events, and those who have come here by virtue of being members of the India International Center. I was wondering how to start today on this somber theme when I remembered something that happened a few years ago, to be precise, in 2009. And it's like this. If you ask anyone in India today, particularly the younger generation, to name any president of India, you will not get Rajendra Prasad or Radhakrishnan. You will get APJ Abdul Kalam. This has to be said to his credit. He has embossed himself on the psyche of India. And why is that? And this is what happened in 2009. He had demitted office as President of India a year and a bit more before that, and came to Kolkata where I was working, and my wife and I had the honor of inviting him to dinner, which he did us the honor of accepting. And as he came in, I, influenced by a collision between two nuclear submarines that took place in the February of that year, the HMS Vanguard of the British Navy and a French submarine, both nuclear submarines in the sense of being nuclear reactor carrying submarines and nuclear warhead carrying submarines, collided in the Atlantic. And as former president came in, I said I must ask him what he thinks about the possibility of nuclear accidents. But I thought I'll preface it by saying, sir, can you just explain to me something which I didn't dare ask you on your earlier visits as president, but now I feel I can ask you? What exactly happens when a nuclear bomb falls? He completely disarmed me by his answer and told me how and why he has embossed himself on the minds of our people. He gave me this answer. He said, in English from Tamil Nadu, the word sir is used not hierarchically but affectionately. So he said, sir, please understand, when the bomb falls, within radius of 10 kilometers, all out. I sort of gulped. Outside the radius of 10 kilometers, radiation. He was being very clinical, totally factual. He left me educated, but he also left me completely shocked that anything like this can be described as clinically as he was describing it. All of us know, and as has just been told to us, on this day, 80 years ago, an atomic bomb which has been described, and I read the description without understanding its technology. The gun-type fission weapon. Now, what follows, I understand, which had been tenderly named Little Boy. Can you believe it? Little Boy was the name given to the bomb, was dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. Reports by the US occupation-led commission estimated 64,500 dead in one flash of fire, exactly as Abdul Kalam Sahib had described, and 72,000 injured. Subsequent calculations and reconsiderations showed that 140,000 had died by the end of that year in Hiroshima. Little Boy. The name was chosen because the design of this machine of death was in relative terms short. But Paul Tibbets, the pilot of the aircraft, of the vessel, which had the name Enola Gay, named after the mother of the pilot, another tender detail locked into the horror of that bombing. Tibbets says that when he and the men on board saw the bomb fall and Hiroshima turn into a pillar of fire, the men said, "My God." And Tibbets had the Distinguished Services Cross pinned on his lapel as soon as he stepped out of the plane. And the description is, from what I have read, Tibbets accepted the cross on his lapel while still smoking a pipe. More. Announcing the accomplishment the same day, President Truman warned that if Japan did not surrender, they could expect, and I quote President Truman, "a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on earth." The rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on the earth. This sounds very familiar today. But Truman did not wait for the surrender. 3 days later, an atom bomb, now cheerfully named Fat Man, for it was of that shape, was dropped by the USA B-19 aircraft on Nagasaki. Not all of us know, nor all of us need to know what exactly a B-19 aircraft means. Not all of us know nor need to know what nuclear yield means, a phrase which Abdul Kalam Sahab had mentioned to me, nuclear yield. We did not need to know that. What we do need to remember today and recall with a complex of emotions, including remorse and guilt and fear, but also, as I will come to it, hope. The fat man left 39,214 dead in a flash. And one of the two pilots in the cockpit of the bomber, Charles Sweeney, after dropping off the bomb, said something which was rather different from those on the Enola Gay. Charles Sweeney said, "What have we done? What have we done?" That day, Truman invoked the sun. Mind you, this is on the day the bomb had fallen on Hiroshima, not on the day the bomb fell on Nagasaki, but on Hiroshima. He invoked the sun. Before Oppenheimer's famous invoking of the sun, Truman said, in a statement issued from the White House, which we can all read online, "It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing." This is Truman's description of the science behind it. "It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe, the force from which the sun draws its power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East." Truman invoking the sun. I do not have to remind this audience of the famous quotation from the Gita which Oppenheimer used after Hiroshima, not after the test, which he is believed to have hailed like anyone involved in the making of a product would hail the blooming of the product. But after Hiroshima, he said, quoting the Gita, "Mrityu sarva harasnam, Mrityu sarva harascha." I am death. I am the all-devouring death. But all these quotations apart, I must say the most scorchingly true, the most searingly honest, the most spontaneous reaction came on the day of the test. July 16, same 80 years ago, 1945. Hitler, Mussolini die in April. Germany surrenders in May. July 16 is the test. Kenneth Bainbridge, one of the physicists who was involved in the selection of the site, was present. And before anyone could say anything, he says, and this is recorded, and I will edit out one word for decency's sake. We are, as they say in good old English, we are in this hall in company. Kenneth Bainbridge said, when he saw the explosion, the Trinity explosion, we, meaning himself and scientists at the test site, we are sons of dash dash now. We are sons of dash dash now. 80 years on, we may reflect on the Trinity test and the two bombs that fell over Japan with history's eyes of self-mortification. But I want to say here something which is important to say, and which is that those who are involved in the nuclear debate are divided in the mind's eye between those who strategize for the nation's security, who are hard-nosed, hard-wired strategists, whose task it is to secure their nation against violent attacks, including attacks now through nuclear and other technologies mentioned before me. one category. And the other category of peaceniks for whom all weapons and all wars are an abomination. This extreme binary has to go. Today, of those three of us who have spoken, let nobody think that those in charge of strategizing and conceiving national security, working through calibrated processes of disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation, are not against war. They are not, they cannot be, they should not be. Otherwise, if they are, how would we be here? And it is an equally fallacious generalization to assume that those who are today reminding themselves of Hiroshima are peaceniks with some kind of a halo on their head and two snowy wings on their shoulders, wanting to enter the short lists for the Nobel Peace Prize. That is not how the situation is. Strategists are not here for invitations for breakfast at the White House or dinner at the Knesset. They are not for killing at all. They are not for killing's sake. They are doing what they are doing because they are tasked to do that. And those who are speaking on behalf of disarmament are doing so because they care for security, the security of peace, not the security of the homicidal form of suicide which nuclear armaments mean. We do not remember, as we should, that today we are in a very different world on a very different planet from 1945. When Truman's bombs fell, Japan could not have retaliated in kind or in any way near that. It was a free field and Truman could invoke the sun. But today that is not so. That is not so in any sense. Retaliation would be in kind and would be instant. And homicide and suicide are two sides of the same coin that is tossed into the world. This is a vital fact which we should remember. A little while before I came here and we assembled here, I was at a commemoration of M.S. Swaminathan, whose centenary happens to be tomorrow. He is remembered for all that he did for the farmers of India. But not so remembered is the fact that Swaminathan was also president of the Pugwash conferences on sciences and war. It was not an ordinary thing that Swaminathan, the first time an Indian was asked to head Pugwash. What Pugwash is, all of us know. We don't have to remind ourselves that the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, which was issued in 1955, an extraordinary document, a document which is extraordinary both as literature and as perspective. These two scientists, Russell and Einstein, with 9 others, phenomenal names, all came together to say to those countries and leaders of those countries which already were weaponized, becoming weaponized, stop. This is the way to suicide. This is not the way to security. The 50th anniversary of Pugwash with Swaminathan in the chair made a whole set of comments, of which the following is worth recalling. This is Pugwash under Swaminathan saying, "The world may have been lulled into a false sense of security, given the fact that nuclear weapons have not been used since Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings in 1945. But time is not on our side. The sober reality is that as long as nuclear weapons exist, they will one day be used. Pugwash. A group of scientists, not pacifists, hard scientists. And it said, further on, the US and Russia should take immediate steps to de-alert the warheads that each country has on high operational alert status, ready to be launched within minutes of an order to do so. And then more practically and tangibly. And this is something which the former Special Envoy on Non-Proliferation and Disarmament and the former Special Envoy on Indo-US civil nuclear collaboration and on climate change will understand. And I say how impudent it is of me to speak on armaments in the presence of a former Union Defense Secretary and a former Secretary for Defense Production in Shri and Vora. But I have to, these are facts. The Pugwash statement said the following: the US and Russia must see that warheads can be stored separately from their launch vehicles. There's something very Swaminathan-esque about this, very practical. Warheads can be stored separately from their launch vehicles, which are missiles and aircraft. And strategic nuclear submarines can be kept in port to increase assurances that neither country will launch their weapons through accident or miscalculation. And then it went on to say something which may have been difficult for an Indian head of Pugwash to quite, but it was said and it was accepted by him. The other nuclear weapon states, UK, France, China, India, Pakistan and Israel, should take all necessary steps to minimize the risk of nuclear use through accident or miscalculation. All nuclear weapon states should declare a no first use policy with explicit declarations that nuclear weapons, until such time as they are eliminated, will only ever be used in retaliation for a nuclear weapons attack against them. This vision is today in tatters. I don't have to give descriptions of what is happening today in the world, what is happening between the countries that have been mentioned in this document, which was released in 2007. But we should know that Hiroshima and Nagasaki are not nightmares from the past, but fearsome possibilities of the present and the future. We know that 2 submarines, nuclear submarines, possibly with both reactors and warheads, have been, as has been said by President Trump of the USA, repositioned in appropriate places. And he said this in retaliation. This is one nuclear head of state, one head of a nuclear state, saying, peeved by a statement of a former head of nuclear state, which is Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, peeved by what Medvedev said. He has done this. And Peskov, the spokesperson of Russia, has said, nuclear rhetoric is wrong. Very ominous. A little while earlier, it was said from Moscow with authority and responsibility that Russia no longer believes in arms control. Russia no longer believes in arms control. The USA has repositioned nuclear submarines. What has happened in Iran, we know. What has happened in the rhetoric that surrounded all that is happening between Israel and Gaza, we know. Apart from the horrors of the physical death-dealing activities of Israel in Gaza. And all of us know too what has happened between Russia and Ukraine. We are not talking of recalls, of recollections, but of realities. But are we doing so just for the sake of giving ourselves a new fright? No. The presence today of Ambassador Manishankaraya reminds me of his repeated references in article after article, speech after speech, and book after book of the 1989 action plan for not just the disarmament and non-proliferation, but for non-violence that was tabled in the United Nations by Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. Calibrated, verifiable, non-discriminatory action plan. So something tangible like that happened. And we also must remember that the previous year, 88, Reagan, can you believe it? Meeting his counterpart in Reykjavik, agreed to an extremely promising reversal of what had been happening in terms of nuclear proliferation. We should remember all this with hope. We should know that the leaders of nuclear weapon nations are not bent on homicide come suicide ordinarily. Ordinarily is the key word. But we are now living in not ordinary times. We are living in extraordinary times. The extraordinariness of our times is the new normal. And I believe we have to do something before it is too late. And before we can say, like Sweeney did, what have we done? We may not even have the chance to say, what have we done? Martin Rees, Lord Martin Rees, once astronomer royal, mathematician of mathematicians, has said that nuclear error and nuclear terror are realities. He's an astronomer, and he has said in his book, The Final Century, which was written in the last century, very creepily written in the last century, not this. He has said, nuclear error and nuclear terror are statistically and in reason and logic more possible than meteors colliding in the sky and hitting the earth. This is an astronomer, not an astrologer, but an astronomer who has said this. I'll conclude by saying, or rather by asking, two questions of myself and therefore of ourselves. We have had and we have the world's greatest scientists. Why is it that no one of the stature of Einstein and Russell in India, or of Rotblat, or of any of the other 9 signatories of Bhagwash, or the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, not one Indian scientist has given to the world, not just to India, but to the world, that message? I respect and admire our scientists, and I am saying this because I think I know why. It is not that they do not want to, but that they fear to say so. They are afraid to say so. Afraid of what? Are they afraid of reprisal by governments which may want them to say nothing of the kind? Perhaps. But more importantly, and this is the second question, why is it that the generality of the people of India, the people of the country which has known the tradition of nonviolence in its veins, why is it that we, the people of India, are not so concerned about the danger of the nuclear, chemical, biological, and now crassly sharp, artificially intelligent weapons? Why? Why is it that there is no rage in our country against the possibility of nuclear self-annihilation? I do not know the answer. I only know the question. And I just know this, that Ashoka's edicts are Ashoka's edicts up there on rock. What works more with us as a people is the sense of a superiority of comprehensive kind, which includes superiority in armaments and does not discriminate between the superiority in arms, which will not only destroy the enemy, which should probably be destroyed in any case, but spilling over boundaries will destroy those who have nothing to do with the tension, but who nonetheless will pay the price for it. As long as there are countries, there will be borders. As long as there are borders, there will be friction. As long as there is friction, there will be war. But it is up to this generation to see what happened 80 years ago and see to it that we do not have to ask, like Sweeney did, what have we done?
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for a very moving, thoughtful presentation, which was also extremely thought-provoking in terms of the questions that you posed. And it reminds me of a little story. You know, when you talked of the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, 1957, which set up the pugwash movement. Now, interestingly, for those of you who may not be aware, it was in 1939 that there was a German scientist who discovered nuclear fission, Otto Hahn. And, you know, it was a scientific discovery, and he discovered the idea of how a chain reaction is what was needed. And once that was identified, then everybody knew that the search was for a chain reaction that could be harnessed to make a fission bomb, a nuclear bomb. At that time, Einstein and Leo Szilard, another Nobel Prize-winning physicist, both of whom had migrated to the United States. They wrote to Roosevelt, and they said that, look, in a letter at the urging of, these were two of the most respected scientists in the United States. And so they wrote to Roosevelt at the urging of the other scientists, saying that the secret of nuclear fission is now known in terms of physics. And the Germans will be working on it. And so we need to start the project. the Germans could not be allowed, World War II had broken out, etc. So in 1942, finally, once Japan also entered the war, Operation Manhattan to develop the nuclear bomb was started. However, Einstein wasn't made the chair. He wasn't asked to take over the design. It was Oppenheimer, because Einstein was seen as a pacifist. And so he couldn't clear the security requirements, and people in the establishment were not confident that he would actually go through with it. So Oppenheimer was brought in, and now look at the irony of this. Oppenheimer completes the exercise successfully, the Trinity test. In 1946, Operation Manhattan is closed down, and Oppenheimer goes back to academia, and then turns into a peacenik. And in 1954, his security clearance is also revoked. So scientists who worked on this often have this, at one level, there is this fascination to unlock the secrets of science. And on the other side, you also have this horror, as you said, what have we done? So virtually all the scientists who worked on this, at least historically, have come back with that. But let me ask you one question, and this is just by way of starting off the conversation. I think you made a very pertinent point, that in the 50s and 60s somehow, there were movements. We saw Pugwash come of age. We saw Pugwash then being awarded with the Nobel Prize. But then somehow this link between civil society, the risks, and so on, this public movement or involvement in nuclear disarmament, that seems to have disappeared, even as nuclear risks seem to be more perceptible. So how is it that you can get back the public involvement for a movement like this as existed? There used to be huge marches once upon a time in Europe, in America, in Japan, and so on. And now the issue does not attract the same kind of citizens' involvement, as it were.
You have said in more precise terms what I had also said, that the public mind in India is not excited by the prospect of disarmament. It is excited by the prospect of triumph in contestations. Now, this is very difficult psychologically and politically to examine and to reflect on. But it has to be done. And I think the question is idle. How is this happening in the land of the Buddha, Mahavira, Nanak, Ashoka, and Gandhi? The point is that it is because we are as we are that the Buddha, Mahavira, Nanak, Gandhi, and Ashoka have been with us. It's because we needed them. The thing is, we do not have their equivalents now. I think it was something which has been very brilliantly brought out in this biography of Homi Bhabha by Bakhtiyar Dadabhai. It's a brilliant book which we should all read, those of us who are interested in war and peace, as to how the first two prime ministers of India, Nehru and Lal Bahadur Shastri, did not close the option at all. They just touched upon it. India had not gone nuclear in those days, but the option was there, and the science lobby then was telling them, you have to just tell us, and we will do. But they were not told so. I mentioned the name of the plane that dropped the bomb. I mentioned the names given to the bombs in black humor. I cannot imagine anyone giving a bomb that name knowing that this bomb is going to kill thousands. But look at us. The Buddha smiles. Buddha smiled is the name we give to the test. And this is in Mrs. Indira Gandhi's government. I would have said Nehru's teachings about the Buddha somehow missed her to give that name to the test. And then to give the name Arihant. Arihant in Sanskrit does mean the killer of the foe. But it is also a sacred name in the Jaina tradition for Jaina Munis. But to give that name to a naval prowess which is likely to be new, we are not different from any nuclear weapon state when it comes to putting aside the moral quotient in nuclear policy and nuclear decision taking, putting it aside. Tibet, whom I mentioned, Tibet said, after he had been fated by the people, and this is directly connected to what you asked me, Rakesh, why has this spirit gone? Where has it gone? He was fated in the United States. But someone did ask him, did you not think of what was happening in moral terms? And he said very honestly, and I have to give it to him, it was almost a lesson in the duties of yogic kind. He said, I had a job to do. I did that job. I could have been given any job. My job was to drop a bomb and kill thousands. My only concern was to do it neatly, and to do it fast. And then he said, morality, it has no place in war. He was being honest. We should not say, oh, what a horrible thing. He was being honest. But it is one thing for us to say he was being honest, and for another to see the horror of that honesty. Yes, you are right, Rakesh. We are in an extraordinary situation where peace is boring, not war. The only thing that has to be explained and understood is that security, which we know by the magic word deterrence, is not the security of life, but the security of a coin which is homicide on one side and suicide on the other side.
Well, thank you, but that is as much of a conundrum as it were. Thank you. I think we can open up the floor for any questions or comments that people may have. May I just request you to identify yourself and keep it short, please.
Yeah, my name is GB Bagai. My first question is, these tactical nuclear weapons, are they also prone to radiation like a regular nuclear weapon? And secondly, if any country makes first use of its nuclear weapon, does it not realize that the entire world will come against it and destroy the entire country? So is that not sufficient deterrence? Thank you.
will know that he has survived? Who will know that he has not survived? Who will be there to say, yes, deterrence has worked, if what you envisage happens?
Well, no nuclear weapon has been designed that does not have radiation after effects so far. So there was a neutron bomb, but it went out of fashion. It was described as the ultimate capitalist weapon that would not bring down buildings, but that has fallen out of favor. Yes, at the back.
Thank you. So I just have this question. My name is Vartul Singh. I'm a government servant. That the Cuban Missile Crisis, was the threat real or was it just a rhetoric of a Cold War?
I missed the first part.
He's wondering about the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962.
I would say it was both. It was certainly something which came over from the past. But does it matter really if it was or it wasn't? When we are talking of survival, does it matter where that particular instance, human missile, came from? What you are asking is a legitimate question, but it belongs to the world of detail. Whereas we are now talking of something much more fundamental. This is not to say your question is out of court, but it is something which has been drowned and drenched by much greater reality.
Well, the Cuban Missile Crisis, to answer your question, is probably the first nuclear crisis that the world had to grapple with. And it led to a lot of realizations. It wasn't the only one, but because it was the first, 1962, it is one that has been analyzed and studied in great detail because a lot of documentation on that has now been declassified, and you'll find it in the National Security Archives. There was a series of interviews that was done in the 1990s with the then Soviet leaders who were involved, scientists who were involved, generals who were involved, as well as their American counterparts. Now, essentially what was happening, what happened was that the US picked up signs that the Soviets were going to put nuclear-tipped missiles in Cuba, which meant that the flight time from Cuba to mainland United States was going to be just of the order of 5 minutes or 7 minutes or something like that, instead of the 25 minutes, half an hour that it would take from Soviet Union to United States. And it posed, therefore, a mortal existential threat to the United States. That was the origin of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Just to give you an idea, eventually it took 13 days, and then a way out was found. There was a back channel that was working between Moscow and Washington. It was President Kennedy's brother, Robert Kennedy, who was liaising with the Soviet ambassador in Washington, who was reporting directly back to the Kremlin, to Khrushchev. But in this process of recording all the meetings, some very interesting facts came to light. For example, at one point, Kennedy turns to McNamara, who was his Secretary of Defense, and to McGeorge Bundy, who was his National Security Advisor, and says, you know, I can't understand why would the Soviets want to do something as reckless as this? Don't they understand how nervous it would make us? I thought they were going to be more rational. It's almost as if we went and put bombs in Turkey. And McGeorge Bundy turns to him and said, Mr. President, we did. So the US had actually deployed Jupiter nuclear missiles in Turkey, which is part of NATO. And eventually the deal that was done was that America gave an assurance that they would not undertake a destabilization of the Castro regime, because in 1961 they had done a covert action, the Bay of Pigs, which had failed miserably. And therefore, the Cubans were nervous, Castro was nervous, and because they were close to the Soviets were nervous and didn't want to see Cuba fall. So US gave that assurance that they would not do that. Soviet Union said they would not bring in the missiles and they will withdraw whatever they had brought in. The unwritten assurance was that US within 6 months would withdraw the Jupiters from Turkey. But this was not to be disclosed, and it was not. Neither side disclosed it. After 6 months, the Jupiter missiles were withdrawn from Turkey. Now, whether something like that is possible today or not is very difficult in today's age of social media. Sir.
Given that throughout the Cold War period and until now, the Soviet Union, followed by the Russian Federation, and the United States have always been in conversation with each other. Is it not extremely dangerous that the only two nuclear weapon powers that have a heavily populated border between them should not be talking to each other at all for 11 years and not have any diplomatic relations for 6 years and have an Operation Sindoor that is open-ended and therefore gives terrorists the opportunity of provoking war between India and Pakistan? This is my first question. I have a related point to make. And that related point is that if we are ready to talk to China, with whom also we have a land border, isn't it self-defeating to describe the Pakistanis as indulging in nuclear blackmail when, in fact, the word used generally is nuclear deterrence? So does the changing of our vocabulary into nuclear blackmail trivialize the immense danger there is of any kind of deliberate or accidental outbreak of nuclear war between India and Pakistan? And in that context, to ask Gopu, sorry to use that an informal expression, but to ask Gopu, what can we do to mobilize political opinion against the bomb as your grandfather did and his hand-picked first Prime Minister of India succeeded in doing? You and I, but I more than you, grew up in an India that was deadly opposed in very, very large measure to nuclear weapons. But after we acquired it, we've acquired with it the mentality of a great power without the ability of a great power. Thank you.
I cannot match your clarity, your precision, or your eloquence. And the first two questions which you posed were like reflections, and they reflected your thinking. And I cannot add to that at all. Your questions carry the answers within them. But on the last, and with that maybe we should close our conversation, on the last point as to what can be done, I can only say this. I started with a reference to President Abdul Kalam. I will invoke his name again and say that the great traction which he had with the people of India, for many reasons, He was regarded as the maker of the bomb, which he was not. He was many things associated with the making of the bomb, but he was not the author of the bomb. But he had attraction. He was known as the man who has made the bomb. I think as President of India, if he had said what we are thinking now, that there is a danger, a dire danger of suicide through homicide, he would have had an impact which few would have had. But I think today, it requires a tall scientist, and we have tall scientists, and all of them feel like we do, to say that this is wrong. India has shown in the past that it can have a very active and successful and smart security defense policy, and at the same time have an equally active role to play for nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. That combination is possible in India, and I think in a way it is possible in India alone. Today, and I say this with knowledge that Ambassador Shyam Saran is with us in this hall today, with his expertise on climate change, we are faced with two horrible extremities. The sure shot fear of a carbon summer and the sure shot possibility of a nuclear winter. Where between the carbon summer and the nuclear winter will the spring of hope come is anybody's guess. But today our conversation might lead to it, and it may come from a sociologist or a scientist. I think India cannot afford to give up its security apparatus at all. It is easy for Nelson Mandela to roll back his nuclear program. He did not have Pakistan and China as neighbors. It is not so easy for us. But as Nehru did, and as Rajiv Gandhi, who I believe was, in terms of political philosophy, descended from his grandfather rather than from his mother, also tried to do. We can have an active plan for our defense and an action plan for nuclear non-proliferation. And now in the much larger and most sinister field of threats from other forms of mass annihilation. I think I have exhausted the patience of this audience and the time on that clock as well.
Okay, we'll take both the questions together. So, yeah, the two ladies here. Yeah, you have a mic.
In Basel, Switzerland, running the NPPD, which is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, they're exhorting countries and governments to sign on it. 193 countries have signed, but there are 3 countries, they are rowing the fact that Pakistan, India, and US, they have not yet signed the document.
Yeah,
They're holding a meeting day after tomorrow.
at the back. The lady at the back.
As Sir said, why Indian mind is not excited at the prospect of disarmament? Is it also because because of the embarrassment faced at the hands of China in 1962, and also as a follower of social media discourses, there was this recurring theme during the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which highlighted the existential crisis faced by Ukraine because of signing the Budapest Memorandum in 1994, surrendering its nuclear weapon and relying on international order and security assurances, which turned at least the Indian youth mind against disarmament and in favor of nuclear weaponization.
Well, I think there is a lot of merit in that, but I think that at the same time that we were intent, as Mr. Gopalkrishna Gandhiji reminded us, on keeping the option alive and not closing our option in the 1960s and 70s. and yet at the same time we could continue to take various initiatives in the field of disarmament. Actually, nothing prevents us from doing the same. Because I'll tell you something. I mean, the Indian nuclear program is actually sui generis. There is no other country that has nuclear weapons that did not start searching for them as a military program. US, followed by the Soviet Union, followed by UK, followed by France, followed by China. Pakistan swore that it would get nuclear weapons after 1971, so Pakistan. North Korea, Israel, before that, because Israel felt that it was beleaguered and had all these adversary Arab states around it, and it had decided in the 1950s itself when it set up its first research reactor at Dimona. And by 60s, 67, they actually had a crude device when that war took place, the 67 war. North Korea, same. So every single country has gone into this program with the primary aim of getting a nuclear bomb. We are actually a very reluctant nuclear weapon state. So yes, so that history is relevant, but I don't think necessarily it should not give us the imagination or the, or let's say the creativity to be able to still work towards, and which is why we have a no first use policy. So I would put it like that. So I think we've gone beyond time now. So let me just say what a pleasure it has been to have listened to Shri Gopalkrishna Gandhiji, and once again, thanks to the India International Center for organizing this to mark 80 years of Hiroshima, and to all of you for having come here today to join us for this. Thank you very much.